If you thought the Nvidia RTX 4090 was a great GPU, maybe we haven't seen anything yet. There are already, of course, rumors for the 5090, which would be coming out presumably sometime next year. And while these are still rumors, let's talk about where it may actually be true. It could be a huge leap that we really haven't seen, I guess, since the 4090. That was a pretty big leap. That's why sometimes I kind of like talking about these rumors. I mean, when the 4090 was rumored and we saw these crazy specs, everybody was like, oh, that's probably overstated or that's not going to be correct. But then when the 4090 came out, it's actually a very impressive GPU. And it was even funny in the beginning when you would see the graphs comparing it to every other GPU, especially like last generation's 3090. The graph would just be like comical. It was really far ahead, and it continues to be the best GPU that's out there. So when we see some of these crazy rumors for the 5090, this is why I think they may actually be true. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. First, here's the first point. Now, Nvidia has been investing very heavily into AI GPUs, their data center. They're making a huge amount of money with that. There's absolutely no doubt. But the new GPU architecture, as far as we know, it's going to be called Blackwell. It's going to have a lot of shared things between the data center GPUs as well as the gaming GPUs. So even if Nvidia is focusing more on data center, because that's where they're going to make more of their money, if you look at their financial reports, it's a big chunk of the money that they make, the biggest one by far. And it's certainly been increasing with the entire AI craze that's been happening recently. But that means that good news for gamers is that if they share a lot of the different specs and they share some of that architecture, it means that we're going to get a lot of these goodies as well. If Nvidia's progressing so quickly with AI and they're focusing on that, it means some of those benefits are going to come down to gaming. I mean, Jensen himself has said that gaming often gets a lot of those things that kind of like trickle down in terms of the technology, or even pretty early, like you could say DLSS 3 and a lot of things like that are definitely a result of machine learning and AI. Secondly, here are a few big important areas that we could be seeing some increases in the 5090 compared to the 4090. Obviously, you can imagine the frequency of the boost clock. According to this article, it's going to go up about 15% in frequency, which would be about a 2.9 gigahertz boost clock. But the most important thing here is it looks like it's getting like a huge upgrade in terms of its memory, especially the memory bandwidth. Rumored at a 512-bit memory bus. Remember, something like a 4070 Ti only has a 192-bit memory bus. So 512 is pretty impressive. That's going to be a very non-constrained VRAM GPU, if you will. There's been a lot of complaints towards Nvidia about the VRAM being limited. Obviously, not on the 4090. That one still has 24 gigabytes of VRAM in terms of the size. The memory bandwidth is good on that GPU. Even the 4080 is, you could say, acceptable. But for the price, it's been a little bit too high still. It's 16 gigabytes of VRAM still isn't enough. But here, we're not talking about the VRAM amount. We're talking about the speed. And it may even have GDDR7 technology as opposed to the GDDR6X that we have now, which is pretty fast. But this one would be maybe up to like 50% faster or a little bit more. It's also going to have more L2 cache. If you remember, L2 cache was something that Nvidia was talking about with like the 4060 Ti, in terms of replacing some of the lack of the VRAM memory bus in terms of doing like DLSS and things like that. So this GPU, the 5090, is going to have not only a much faster memory width, it's also going to have more L2 cache. Now, you can say that because of like AI and machine learning, the data center GPUs, not this one, this is the gaming GPU, but those GPUs need faster memory. The more memory that you have and the faster that it is, it's going to be able to go through more data sets a lot more efficiently, a lot faster. So if Nvidia is going in that direction, that means that, of course, the high-end gaming GPUs are also going to have similar characteristics, because that's the route that they're developing. Now, remember, this is the 5090, which would be the most powerful and expensive GPU that Nvidia is most likely not wanting to really downsize. Like the 4090 is a great example of a GPU that's, very powerful. Nobody really complains about any limitations there. So it's difficult to tell if the other GPUs in like the RTX 50 series, if you will enjoy the same type of memory boost. I'm not so sure, because if you look at Nvidia's trend for the RTX 4000, the GPUs have had not only more limited VRAM, but the memory bus has been much more narrow. You look at something like a 4060, 4060 Ti, 4070, 4070 Ti, they're all significantly more narrow memory width bus, like the 4070 Ti with only 192-bit, compared to last generation, like a 3070 Ti had a wider memory bus. And of course, the VRAM amounts have been pretty limited as well, topping out usually around 12 like the 4070 Ti, and you have to step all the way up to the 4080 to get 16 gigabytes of VRAM, or the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, which should have been the original GPU anyway. So will Nvidia continue to bump up the VRAM amount like on the 5090, for example, or are they going to keep the other GPUs in the stack much more limited in terms of their VRAM performance? I don't know, maybe they can use those resources on the data center side. Obviously, the more that they focus there, they're much more profitable there. So instead of giving you like a 5060 Ti with good VRAM, they can use whatever resources they save on the gaming end to pump in AI, which is going to be more profitable. And maybe the 5090 might be an exception because first, it's their flagship product. They can't have, any serious limitations, especially with VRAM on the 5090. And I'm sure even though the 5090 isn't technically a data center GPU, I know a lot of people use the 4090 for like machine learning and different things like that, especially before they put it on like, a bigger project, for example, where they may use the AI specific data center GPUs. They may use a 4090 in a smaller machine environment to test maybe some attributes of whatever it is they're doing with AI. It can certainly be used in the smaller scales, and I know maybe smaller companies who may not have access or the capital to get the much more expensive machine learning data center GPUs from Nvidia. I'm sure they can use 4090s as well, and the same is going to be true for 5090. Remember, Nvidia sold a lot of 4090s. I remember the first day my Micro Center sold like over 150, which was basically everything they had, and it literally sold out. And then if you compare to like the recent 7800 XT from AMD, they sold like 12. The 4060 Ti, they probably sold like 5 or 7. So those are much cheaper GPUs that sold in much smaller numbers. The 4090 is, $1,600 GPU, which sold out, and it was, perpetually sold out for months after its release. It's only now that you can sort of find them a little bit easier, but the price still stays a little bit high. That's because that's a GPU that's not only the best for gaming, people use it for content creation and some AI as well if they don't have access to the beefier Nvidia data center GPUs. So interesting to see. That's why I think the 5090 may be one of the best gaming GPUs we've ever seen by like a long margin. It is pretty incredible to think that something may outclass the 4090 by a big gap, but I wouldn't be surprised if the 5090 was compared to the 4090 what the 4090 was to the 3090. They have some similarities, but the performance gap may really get pretty big. And that kind of explains why AMD, some rumors said they may not even really want to try and do a high-end GPU. Maybe they know what's coming from Nvidia and it's just going to be no point in getting even close. So maybe they can compete with like the 5070 or something like that, like they used to with the 5700 XT. But I'd like to see them compete for the top end as well. AMD is a strong company with powerful resources in both CPUs and GPUs. I'd like to see the 7900 XT continue into next generation and be something that at least puts up some type of competition with the 5090. But Nvidia's still on top, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. What do you guys think about this GPU? Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.